Hey guys, MJ here, coming to you from the wonderful location of my dining room, because of course we are all still in quarantine. For my painter folks, real quick, I just want to say, sorry, I haven't uploaded a video in like a year. I was getting ready for a show in the fall, and then in the wintertime it was suspiciously cold in my shop, so I just didn't paint. But what I did do is I picked up a new hobby, embroidery. It's basically painting but with thread, and it's less messy, and I can do it on my couch. So, real quick for all my new people coming in from the Etsy shop, we're going to do some simple videos so you can get a visual of what I'm explaining in the tips and tricks guide. Okay, so you got your kit in the mail. You ordered it from Etsy, hopefully from my shop, but if not, that's okay too. Now what? First thing you need to do is hoop your fabric. So you probably got one of these in your kit. So you're going to undo the screw. Going to center your fabric in there. And this is just an old piece of scrap fabric. Push it down. Tighten up the screw a little bit. And pull the edges. Careful not to pop the frame off. Pull the edges until it's tight. And then tighten it up some more. There you go. That's pretty good. Okay, so you've got your pattern all hooped up. What comes next is the thread. So for most of your kits, you're going to get either a full skein of thread, which means you use a lot, or a carded bit of thread, which means you're only going to use a little bit. For your skeins, you're going to look for the end with the numbers and the barcode on it. You're going to pull the tail from that end, because if you pull from the other end, it's going to get all knotted and be a crazy mess and make you mad. So you just pull it out real slow. Don't pull too much out. Don't pull out more than you can work with. And then snip it off and set that aside. Okay, now most patterns are going to call for a strand count. And if you look real close at your thread, you'll see that it's actually made up of 6 individual threads, which I highly doubt is going to show up on this. But so when they mean a strand, they mean one of these 6 is one strand. So a lot of times my patterns will call for 2 or 3 strands. So at that point, what you're going to do is kind of untwist it a little bit until it gets sort of flattened out, and then separate it with your fingernail, and then pull real gentle. Just slow and easy wins the race, because it wants to tangle on itself because it's already spun up and coiled. And of course this one is not pulling correctly, but that's fine. There you go. Now you have 2 strands. And then you can stick that in your needle and work with that. One strand, believe it or not, is actually much easier to pull than multiple strands. So one strand is, you've got your bits separated, you're going to get the one strand and hold the rest between your thumb and forefinger and just pull. And you can see now we have one strand. And oftentimes, if I'm doing delicate work, or the patterns are even call for this, pull an extra long single strand, thread a small needle, and bend it in half so you're actually working with 2 strands, but it's a more delicate stitch because you're using a small needle. Alright, so you've got your needle threaded. However you choose to do that is up to you. You can use the needle threader or lick it and stick it. I'm not going to show you how to do that. So you just want to tie a small knot in the end, just big enough to make sure that it won't go through to the front. And the first stitch we're going to talk about today is the most commonly used back stitch. And you'll have to excuse my setup. I don't have one of those fancy embroidery hoop holder things. I converted a small canvas easel with some clamps. So you want to start at one end. And see how that knot's big enough to hold it to keep it from coming through the front side. And then you're just going to trace your line, go back down, and then come up a little bit further. And then go back down into the hole you already made. And so for straight areas you can use larger stitches, and for curved areas you're going to use smaller stitches. Alright, so you've come to the end of your back stitching, but now your pattern calls for 2 or 3 rows of back stitching in a staggered pattern. That means you're going to come real close to the previous stitches and start in the middle. See how it's between in the middle of this stitch? And then back down, sort of in the middle of the next stitch. And up, sort of in the center of the next stitch. And so on and so forth. this just makes a thicker row or thicker line of stitches. And I use this quite a lot for stems and branches. So it doesn't look so, I don't know, puny. Alright, so we're all done with the stem. You can see the difference. There's 3 rows of staggered stitches and then just 1 row of back stitch. So that looks pretty nice. Now let's move on to your next most common stitch, which is going to be the satin stitch. So that is just as flat as you can get it, a fill. And it's pretty self-explanatory. And the way I like to do it is I break up my elements into sections. That way I can keep my stitching pretty straight. Oops. So I'll split the leaf in half, and then I'll split those 2 halves in half again. And these kind of framework stitches give me a guideline and help to keep everything straight. And sometimes you've got more room at the top than you do at the bottom, and that means you're probably going to end up going into some of the same holes you've already punched. That's okay. Okay, real quick, let's go over how to do a leaf with a satin stitch, although I generally try to use the leaf stitch, but this is good for other applications like leaves that don't have a perfectly round edge, or leaves that are like, you know, bulbous in the top and then come to a point down here. These leaves here, you know, they're basically the same on both sides with a split down the center, so I would normally use a leaf stitch for that, but I'll show you how to satin stitch it. So, the same as when I was doing the petals, I'm going to give myself some guidelines to follow so things don't get out of whack. And of course, you want the angle of your stitches to kind of go the same direction as the leaf. So we'll angle up the stitches. Oh, maybe this is a good time to show you what happens when there's a knot on the back. Oh, no, I just had it hooked on my clamp. Alright. Get that back on there. Okay. So you give yourself some guidelines. fill in between these, and then you'll come over to the other side and do the exact same thing. So let's just pretend that I've already done this side and filled it all in. And sometimes if you need to figure out where your needle needs to go, you can just hold your thread down and move it along that path, and then you'll know where you need to punch your line. Alright, so now for the tip of the leaf, you can either pretend that line is still going up there, just kind of envision it, or you can just fill it in. Kind of like on the angle, so you'll start at the very top, and then you'll come down to where those other stitches are, and then you've got something to follow, kind of a guideline. Alright, there you go. So I'm going to finish this up and we'll be right back. Alright, so we finished our satin stitch leaf. Doesn't look too bad. You can leave it like this, or you can come up and kind of detail the center. Just going to use the back stitch to do that. This is especially helpful if your stitches are messy. Now something else, if you have a kind of a messy stitch outline, you can actually backstitch a border around it and it'll make it look like it never even happened. Like kind of like these flowers are kind of messy. You know, if I was feeling ambitious, I would just go around this with a purple backstitch, and it would clean everything up and make it all look like it's supposed to be that way. So you could do a backstitch around your leaf. A lot of times, like most of my patterns are iron off, so all these lines, when you're done stitching them, you'll take it off your hoop and you'll iron it, and it'll erase all these lines. So if you didn't exactly hit the line, it's okay, it's going to disappear anyway. But sometimes you just need to clean up the area a little bit. So if it's messy, just stitch around it. How about, hey all you cool cats and kittens?
Ew, no, cool cats and kittens. Ew, I hate that so much.
That's right, I don't like that. What am I doing again? Heidi ho, neighbors!
Ew.
No? Okay.
Just say hey guys.
What was my line again?
Hey guys, it's MJ here.
Yep. Stop laughing at me.
I farted.
Oh, no.
Oh god.
Okay, quiet on the set.
Okay.
Coming to you from